Gonzaga's first true road game of the season comes against a hot shooting Arizona State team led by a very familiar foe.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network on the planet. I am your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Well, folks, Gonzaga plays its first road game of the year on Friday in Tempe against the Sun Devils of Arizona State. We're going to break down this new look roster for the Sun Devils. No key returners for this team, but they do have some familiar faces. Some players Gonzaga fans will definitely recognize. We're also going to talk about our keys to victory against this team that has been shooting the lights out so far in the early part of the season. And then we're going to close out the show taking a look at the Pac-12's newest media partner. The Pac-12 partnership appears to be over now that they have added a third and final media partner. We're going to talk about what that means for Gonzaga to close out the show. But first, we got to get ready for another game in the midst of what is a very busy stretch of games for this Gonzaga team. You had that game against Oklahoma on Saturday, Creighton on Tuesday, Arizona State on Friday night, and then you got Southern Utah on Monday. 4 games in a quick succession of time here. A nice test for Gonzaga early in the season. Friday's game is at 8 p.m. Pacific time. So for those of you out on the East Coast, out in New York, going to be a late one tipping off. It'll be on ESPN2. We will talk about ESPN a little bit later in the show, as they are not a part of the Pac-12's new media deal, although we are very used to seeing Gonzaga games on ESPN, and we are not typically used to seeing games starting on time because of that. This 8 p.m. tip, it might end up being more like an 8:05 or 8:08 or 8:12 tip, as we have seen so often in the last 10 or so years of watching Gonzaga basketball games. I said ESPN just to clarify. This game will be on ESPN2 for Gonzaga against Arizona State, also available in many places on ESPN Plus as well. This is the return of a home-and-home series that started last year between Gonzaga and Arizona State when Arizona State came out to Spokane to play the Zags at the Kennel. And it was a pretty close game. Gonzaga ended up winning, I think 88-80 was the final score. It was a couple of possession game, though, and even closer than that in the final few minutes. Gonzaga kind of struggled in this game. This was a bit of their kind of hangover coming off that big win over the Baylor Bears early in the season, and kind of exposed some of the issues that Gonzaga ended up having throughout the season last year. We saw some of those kind of start to show up in that game against Bobby Hurley and the Sun Devils, but don't expect to see a lot of familiar faces. In fact, the most familiar face outside of Coach Hurley that you will see is Adam Miller, who was, of course, on that team last year, scored 10 points against Gonzaga in that game and is now going to be playing on the other side for the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Very curious and excited to see how that fan base at Desert Financial Arena welcomes Adam Miller for being on a different team coming into the year. Sun Devils 2-0 so far on the season. They have wins over both Southern Utah and Utah Tech. So have been playing some schools out in the state of Utah. Gonzaga, by the way, playing Southern Utah on Monday. So we'll have that opponent in common. Have a feeling that the Southern Utah staff's going to be staying up to watch this game quite intently to see what Gonzaga does differently against Arizona State and how they can incorporate that into that matchup on Monday. But again, Arizona State 2-0, that's great. Southern Utah is 307th at KenPom. Utah Tech is 253rd at KenPom. And in fact, Arizona State began the season in the preseason rankings at KenPom at 75th. And despite winning both of their first 2 games, they've actually dropped to 81st. Some of that is probably teams who are behind them having really strong starts to the season and moving up. But if you're Arizona State, like you won both these games, you won 81-64 and 81-66 were the final scores. So it's not like they were close. It's not like they were really in serious danger of losing either game, but you didn't really blow out either of these teams. And again, with one of them being outside the top 300, with the other being outside the top 250, it's not an incredibly promising start to the season, although we have seen Arizona State doing a couple of things very, very well this year. Their adjusted offensive efficiency at KenPom is 86th. Their adjusted defensive efficiency is 74th. So kind of, makes sense. They're pretty much right in the middle of that at 81st overall. Tempo-wise, they're 111th, so they're playing at a pretty fast pace. Tempo data for KenPom does incorporate like previous years, and since this roster is brand new, that data is a little bit wonky early in the season, but 2 games of over 80 points, we have seen this team, their average time of possession is kind of in the middle of the pack as well. So this team's going to try to get out and go more than some of the other teams that Gonzaga has played so far this year. We've alluded to it already a few times, but you're not going to see a lot of familiar faces. Jaden Quayton's out the door, transfers to Kentucky, will potentially be healthy for Gonzaga's matchup against the Wildcats in early December. We'll see about that. Jason Sonone, their other star freshman from Bobby Hurley's team last year, has transferred to St. John's, had quite a few players graduate, had a guy get suspended, and is now part of an investigation into gambling. So that's another storyline for this Arizona State team, at least for last year's team, not an issue for them currently. But while there are not going to be a lot of faces that we recall from last year's team, there are plenty of familiar faces on this Arizona State team, and it starts with Moe Odum. It would have taken I wouldn't have been able to even get this research done before tip-off on Friday night, but I suspect that Gonzaga has never or very rarely faced a player at 3 different schools. Obviously, I say it would take a long time to research. We probably wouldn't have to go much farther back than like 2019 because it really wasn't happening all that often with players transferring multiple times in their careers. Moe Odum began his collegiate career at Pacific, and then he played a year last year at Pepperdine, where he was 4th in the country in assists per game and yet 2nd in the WCC in assists per game, thanks to Ryan Nemhard. And then he transferred this offseason. He parlayed a remarkable performance with Pepperdine in the WCC tournament. He went absolutely bananas for 3 games in that conference tournament, willed Pepperdine to a couple of W's before they finally fell short. And then he hit the transfer portal. And without trying to sound too negative about Arizona State, I was a little surprised at how quickly Moe Odum committed in the transfer portal. I wonder if he had stayed out there a little bit longer, what other programs could have potentially come calling. But we know Arizona State's got a pretty good bag of NIL money, and being in the Big 12 is certainly not the worst place for somebody like Odum to end up. He's been good for them so far, averaging 11.5 points, 7 assists, and 5 boards through those first 2 games. Gonzaga's got a lot of experience dealing with him, but he has been a thorn in their side and will likely be a big part of the game plan on Friday night. Marcus Adams Jr., also another familiar name and face for Gonzaga fans, as he was actually briefly committed to Mark Few and the Gonzaga Bulldogs. He first committed to Kansas and was actually there long enough that when he decided to decommit from Kansas, before he'd even played a game, he had to actually enter the transfer portal because he'd already enrolled in classes, was then committed to Gonzaga for about a month, decided not to come to Gonzaga, committed to BYU, played a game at BYU, and then sat out the rest of the year. Then transferred to CSUN, Cal State Northridge, to be closer to his family. He had some health issues with immediate members of his family, so opted to play closer to home. Balled out at CSUN, like 17 points a game, 8 rebounds, 40% from 3, 60% from 2. Like, he was really good in the Big West. Now he's transferred to Arizona State. Has been okay coming off the bench. Only averaging 4 points per game. He did not score in the first game of the season, but he had 8 points in his second game of the year. Be interested to see kind of as the season goes on what his role ends up looking like, but so far hasn't been a big contributor yet for the Sun Devils. The other familiar face, Santiago Truett from San Diego, transfer that Gonzaga faced last year with the Toreros. He's averaging 8.5 points, 6.5 boards, and 2 assists as a starting forward for Bobby Hurley's team at 13-10 against Utah Tech. A couple other major contributors for them before we get into our keys to victory. 7'1" freshman Masamba Diop has been really good so far. And again, especially for a freshman, especially for a big man, the competition level has not been very good. But I mean, through 2 games, he's averaging 16 points, 5.5 boards, 1.5 blocks. He had 18-6 against Utah Tech. He had 14, 5, and 3 against Southern Utah. He's been efficient around the rim. This will be his first big test. This will not be Gonzaga's first big test. They've played talented big men like Mo Odum and Owen Freeman so far, but 7'1" is a different animal. and he is a big guy. He's a big shot blocker. Like this is going to be a bit of a different type of test for Graham Ike and Braden Huff. But again, we have yet to see Diop have to face any competition remotely close to as good as Graham Ike and Braden Huff. That's going to be a big factor in this game. Also got to shout out Anthony Pig Johnson, what he goes by, 6'3" guard, playing his first year of D1 basketball. He was an NAIA All-American last year at Cumberland's College, averaging 12 points, 3.5 assists through the first 2 games with the Sun Devils. Well, Arizona State is shooting lights out from 3 so far this year, while Gonzaga is not. How will that factor in on Friday? We're going to talk about that and more coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, the NBA and college basketball are back, and there is no better place to get in on all of the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And even if you have missed the start of a game, or if you just want to ride out the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who's going to score first to those fourth quarter comebacks. And you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay to get a shot at a bigger payout. And it keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Gonzaga is 12.5-point favorites on Friday night in Tempe against Arizona State. They're minus 880 on the money line. Not a great return on investment, but certainly a lot of confidence by the odds makers in Gonzaga against the Sun Devils. And right now, folks, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags, still part of the great Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank all of you who have helped make this the #1 sports podcast network on the planet. We got 5 keys to a Gonzaga victory to talk about here in this second segment for this game against Arizona State on Friday night. And we alluded to it in that teaser there. We talked about it a little bit in the first segment, but key number 1 for Gonzaga, something they've done very well so far this season, lock down the perimeter. Do not let this team get open looks from 3. Do not let them beat you from beyond the arc. Again, the caveat that we have already said multiple times, Arizona State has played 2 games. They have not played an opponent inside the top 250 at KenPom. But they are currently shooting 38% from 3 as a team. That is 18 for 47. So again, not a super big sample size because it's only 2 games, but they're taking over 23 3-point attempts per game. They're making 9 threes per game. If you're Gonzaga, you do not want Arizona State making 9 or more threes at home. You want to make sure that they are not getting that many good looks. And if they're taking 20 plus threes, it's that a lot of them are not good looks and that you're able to hold them to 25 or 30 or 32% shooting from 3 instead of them approaching that 38 to 40% mark. And again, sample size is tiny. 2 players really driving it home for them. Moe Odum being one of them. No surprise there. He's 5 of 11 from 3 on the season, so 45.5%. Bryce Ford, transfer from them. I think he's from UC San Diego. He's 5 of 10 from 3 so far on the season. They got Pig Johnson's 2 of 6, so not a great percentage, but kind of one of the only other players, I think the only other player who has 5 or more attempts on the season. They got a lot of guys who are 1 of 1, a lot of guys who are 1 of 2. So, again, sample size is super relevant here, but collectively as a group, this team has shot it quite well from beyond the arc. However, Gonzaga has been outstanding against the 3-point line this year. It's almost been lost in the shuffle. We've had so many conversations about how good Gonzaga has been at turning teams over, at limiting their assists, at getting steals, at getting out in transition, at forcing tough shots, things like that. Gonzaga has held teams to 22% from 3 on the season. Creighton in particular was just egregiously could not get any open looks from 3. They got a few early in the game, and then just the 3-point shot vanished as the game went on. Oklahoma really struggled to knock down open looks despite having very good shooters on the team. Nigel Pack, 40% guy for his career. Xavier Brown, 38% guy for his career. Dalton Forsythe off the bench was 44%. Like, that team had great shooters. Creighton had great shooters. Arizona State had great shooters. Gonzaga has so far been able to completely stymie very good offensive teams outside shooting, and they will need to do it again, this time in a road environment, which does add a little bit to that challenge for the Zags. We talked about Moe Odum. We're going to talk about Moe Odum again. Key number 2 for Gonzaga, you got to get him out of his rhythm. This is, I believe, the first key we've had up to this point that's very specifically centered on one player. Obviously, we had keys about, trying to get Moe Odum in foul trouble for Oklahoma. But for Gonzaga, they've seen a lot of Moe Odum, and he's seen a lot of them. And while he's in a different system, I'd be very curious to ask Mark Few or any college coach, like, most coaches don't have experience coaching against the same player at a third different school. I can't imagine this has happened very many times in college basketball history, but I wonder, like, because Mo kind of knows what Gonzaga is going to do. Like, he's faced them, and they, their system changes obviously and will look different. But for Gonzaga, like, they're going against Moe Odum when he's in a completely different system, so you don't know exactly what that role is going to look like. I just wonder what kind of goes into game planning for a kind of a unique situation like this one. But again, the Zags staff's probably tired of seeing Moe Odum, but Moe Odum has had a lot of success against Gonzaga. In his first game against them last year for Pepperdine, he had 24 points and 8 assists. He nearly willed Pepperdine to a win over Gonzaga. That was one of Gonzaga's uglier games of the year, and it was because Moe Odum just went absolutely insane in that game. At the time, of course, Gonzaga was not playing Emmanuel Inocente. He actually did play a little bit in that game, but like in the final few minutes, and he was guarding Moe Odum when he came into the game. And they certainly didn't have Jalen Worley. We have seen Gonzaga use Worley and Inocente on ball handlers multiple times already this season. I think that's going to be the game plan. Obviously, Worley's not going to start, or at least I say obviously. I don't think they're going to make a starting lineup change with Worley, but what's going to happen is, and why Worley is such an incredibly unique and valuable player, is Worley's going to come into the game for either Graham Ike or Braden Huff, because he is playing power forward. He's going to come into the game for one of the bigs, and then he's going to draw the assignment on the 5'11" guard. It's so unique. Anton Watson occasionally guarded perimeter players, but not the way that Gonzaga is utilizing Jalen Worley. It's what makes him such an insanely unique and valuable and versatile player for Gonzaga. I expect Worley and Inocente to draw Moe Odum's that assignment throughout this game. I think we'll probably see Mario on him at times, maybe Braden Smith on him at times as well, but that's going to be a big part of this game, is if you can disrupt Moe Odum with that length and physicality of those bigger players and get him out of his rhythm, because he's really the straw that stirs the drink for the Sun Devils. Key number 3, I promise it won't be a key for every game, but it's going to be a key for this one. Got to dominate on the glass. And Arizona State has had a massive size advantage in their first 2 games and hasn't dominated. They have not been very good on the boards. They got out-rebounded by Southern Utah. Again, outside the top 300 at KenPom, and Southern Utah out-rebounded Arizona State 40-39. Southern Utah had 16 offensive rebounds in that game. And yeah, Arizona State did out-rebound Utah Tech in their second game, barely, 41-36, and they still gave up 10 offensive boards. This team has not been a good rebounding team despite the size that they have, and they have not faced anybody even close to as good as Gonzaga, even close to as big as Gonzaga. I have a feeling that Gonzaga is going to have a massive advantage on the boards in this game, and that's going to make it really difficult for Arizona State to win this game if they're not getting second chance opportunities. If Gonzaga is getting second chance opportunities, Worley's averaging over 3 offensive rebounds per game. Tyon has been a great offensive rebounder. Obviously, Graham and Braden are going to have the size down low to impact the game in that space. And again, this freshman, Masamba Diop, he's 7'1". He's the biggest player Gonzaga has played all year long, but he's never played anybody like Graham Ike, anybody like Gonzaga. He has not faced this kind of physicality at this level at all. And so I think that's going to be a big time advantage for Gonzaga in this one. Truett's a veteran guy. He had 10 rebounds in one of their games. He was at San Diego, so he's at least faced Gonzaga before, but he's not a super dynamic rebounder necessarily. So I think that Gonzaga is going to have a pretty big advantage here, and they need to take advantage of it. Key number 4 kind of goes back to key number 1. We said they need to lock down the perimeter. Gonzaga also needs to find that outside shot, because Arizona State's been very good against the 3 so far this year. Part of that is because Southern Utah shot an absolutely horrific 4 of 25. Good old 16%. I didn't mean to undersell you, Southern Utah, but 16% from 3 for the Thunderbirds in that first game. Utah Tech was 9 of 30. Not great, but a little bit better, at least for Utah Tech in that one. But the Zags have not been good from the 3-point line. 31% through the first 3 games. It's one of the very few things that Gonzaga has not done well up to this point in the season. And in a true road environment, against a team that shoots it well, and against a team that, again, with the sample that we have, has defended the three-point line well. This is a pretty big, important thing for Gonzaga. Would be a really nice game for Adam Miller to bounce back. Adam Miller played well in the game against Creighton. I think he was Gonzaga's second or third leading scorer, as one of the 4 players in double figures. So it wasn't like he was bad, but he didn't make any of his three-point attempts. Tyne Grant Foster was 1 of 6 in that game. Steele Venters, I think, was 1 of 5. You need your three-point shooting in this game. For Miller, obviously, he's returning to the place he played the last 2 years, returning to the place where he got his degree. He spoke very glowingly of Bobby Hurley and the coaching staff after the game against Creighton, but he wants to go in there and win. Like, there's no debate that he wants to go in there and win. I think because he's a veteran guy, you don't have to worry about him getting a little too keyed up and maybe making mistakes that way. But you'd like to see him have a good game in a place that he's familiar, in a place he's taken a whole lot of three-point shots in his career. Same with Venters, obviously not for the same reasons, but you just like to see him get on track. He has not been the player that we know he's capable of being so far in a Gonzaga uniform, but it's also, he's played 3 games after missing 2 years. It's very understandable that he is not, just immediately coming out of the gates firing. But this might be the right time for Venters to find that outside shot, hit a couple threes, get some momentum building for himself, and quiet that crowd a little bit, which leads to our final key to victory. You got to tune out the noise. First true road game of the season, always a challenge. A couple of years ago, Gonzaga lost to Washington, what I believe was their first true road game of the season, and Gonzaga's younger players really struggled. Braden Huff really struggled. Dusty Stromer really struggled because it was their first road game ever. The good news for Gonzaga's team this year is they are so old, so much experience, that this isn't really something they have to worry about. The only rotation player who will be playing his first true road game at the college level is Mario Saint-Superi, and I cannot imagine that Mario, again, no disrespect, I think this is going to be a pretty enthusiastic crowd for Arizona State. I think they're going to bring it, but I don't think it's going to compare to what Mario has seen at the professional level in Europe, what he saw a few months ago at Eurobasket. Like, he's not going to be fazed by this. Certainly Gonzaga's veteran guys, the Graham Ekes and the Tyne Grant Fosters and the Steele Venters and the Jalen Worleys, and of course Adam Miller, who's going to be very familiar with this, those guys are just not going to be fazed. Braden Smith is maybe a player you worry about a little bit because he was at Colgate, and Colgate, didn't play in arenas that were this big very often. And when they did, the crowd wasn't bringing it. When Colgate played like Syracuse and other high, top 20 or top 25 or at least power conference teams, those crowds weren't bringing it the way that Arizona State's going to bring it for a nationally ranked powerhouse program like Gonzaga. I'm not overly concerned about Smith, but I do think it's like hey, let's not let them speed you up. Like, let's not let the crowd get to you. Like, play your game, play in your pace. And everybody else there's so much leadership and veteran experience on this team that it just feels like something that shouldn't end up being an issue for Gonzaga. But you don't know how your team's going to play in a road environment until you've played in a road environment. And this is where that test is going to be for Gonzaga to start the season. Well, folks, the final piece of the Pac-12 media rights puzzle was announced on Thursday. What does USA Network coming on board mean for the Gonzaga Bulldogs? We're going to talk about that coming up in just a second. But first, folks, when the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. And their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service has your blind side covered. And if you need parts fast for a project, Supply House has next-day delivery. Talk about a game changer. Part Finder tools and 3D schematics can save you hours on jobs where every detail matters. And their Trademaster perks like priority shipping and dedicated support make the whole process even smoother. So join the free Trademaster program today and score perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHCollege5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. All right, folks, closing out the show, switching gears to talk about the new Pac-12 media rights deal. We haven't had an update on the media rights package for the Pac-12 for a long time. We found out a few months ago that CBS was going to be the flagship partner for the new conference that Gonzaga will be joining in the 2026-27 season. We found out that the CW is going to be involved, which we'd kind of already known, or at least had been rumored, as they have been very involved with the Pac-2, with Oregon State and Washington State football these last couple of years. And now we know that the final piece of the media package, and I say final piece, the likely final piece of the media package, is coming together with USA Network. It's the same place that has the long-standing history of like hour-long TV shows. They had the Blue Sky era, so shows like Psych and Monk and various other Burn Notice is the other one. So prominent TV network, not super known for their sports, although they have always had sports as part of their package. So it's not like this is a brand new thing for them. So you have USA Network joining CBS and the CW as the three main pillars of the Pac-12 media rights deal, all starting in 26-27, all running for 5 years through the 2030-2031 season. The main thing about this that is directly relevant for Gonzaga is that USA Network is going to host the Pac-12 conference tournament games. Now, the championship, so if it's like hypothetically, let's say Gonzaga and San Diego State are playing in the Pac-12 conference tournament championship game, that will be on CBS. CBS has already negotiated for and has the rights to the championship game. But the other conference tournament games, Gonzaga needs to beat Utah State and Colorado State to get to San Diego State in the championship. Those games would end up being on the USA Network. Here is the full breakdown of where men's basketball games, we'll talk about women's games in a second, where men's basketball games will be with this media package now known. CBS, the flagship CBS channel, will host a minimum of 3 regular season men's basketball games. Just 3, might be more, but it might be just 3. That does not include the Pac-12 championship game, which will be among them as well. So it'll be 3 plus that title game. Now, the CBS Sports Network, which is a different channel, is going to host 17 men's basketball games. And this is annually. All of this is annually. So 20 combined games between CBS and the CBS Sports Network, as well as the conference tournament championship. The CW will then get 35 regular season men's basketball games, and then the USA Network will get 50 regular season men's basketball games. So the majority of the Pac-12 regular season men's basketball games each and every year will end up on the USA Network. That is what has just been discovered. That is what has just been revealed by this new partnership by the Pac-12 on Thursday. On the women's side of things, 15 games on the CW plus the tournament, and then 5 to 10 games annually on the USA Network. So Pac-12 women's basketball will have something in the ballpark of 20 to 25 regular season women's basketball games televised. That's a huge deal for women's basketball. Right now, the WCC's media deal, women's basketball is pretty much entirely on ESPN+. It's pretty rare for Gonzaga to get a game on ESPN or ESPN2. It's not impossible, but it is rare. In this case, 25 Pac-12 games will end up on either the CW or USA Network, which are very available. And I think that's the main other takeaway from this new partnership for the Pac-12. Financials have not been disclosed. I am not sure that financials will directly be disclosed. They don't have to be. It's not necessarily going to be like a lot of people clamoring to know exactly how much money Gonzaga is getting annually from the Pac-12. And I'm sad to tell you that there's no guarantee we're ever going to get that number. Estimates for the media deal range from anywhere to $7 million annually to $12 million annually. I tend to think it's somewhere in the middle of that. I would like to believe it's a little closer to 10, but it's certainly, I'd be surprised if it was as low as 7. I'd also be kind of surprised if it was 12. I think it's gonna be somewhere closer to the like 8.5 to 10 million range, but that's more of just kind of speculation on my part. But what we do know is the Pac-12 has prioritized reach. They have prioritized making sure that their sporting events are going to be visible by as many people as possible. And a partnership with CBS and CBS Sports Network, which are over the air. They're easy to have if you have YouTube TV, which has not been easy with ESPN. For those of you who are aware of that, obviously, it's easy to have the linear distribution, very easy to get CBS and CBS Sports Network. The CW is over the air as well. Very easy to get the distribution on that as well. And USA Network's in 70 million households. A lot of people are going to be able to watch Pac-12 sporting events because of this media partnership. It's possible it means that the value of the deal is a little bit lower, but Gonzaga will take that because they're still getting a full share. They're still getting a full share of whatever this is. If it is the worst case and it's $7 million, that's a lot more money than Gonzaga was getting from the WCC. But more than likely, this is close to $10-ish million that Gonzaga is getting from this media deal, while also making sure their sporting events are very, very visible. And per John Canzano, a Pac-12 insider, he has said that CBS is going to get the first pick of these games for football, for basketball, for whatever. And it's going to function sort of like a draft. It's not exactly how it's going to go, but for purposes of this conversation, think of it that way. CBS gets first pick. CW gets second pick. And then USA Network gets third pick. What this means is that while we've just been talking about how USA Network's getting involved and how for you, making sure you have USA Network by 2026, particularly for the Pac-12 conference tournament, I don't think USA Network's going to have a whole lot of Gonzaga regular season basketball games because CBS has 20. And if CBS is looking at the conference and they're looking at the games, you have the CBS flagship channel, which has 3. If I'm CBS, I am probably saying, give me Gonzaga, San Diego State. Give me Gonzaga, San Diego State. Give me both of those games. And then, I mean, what's your next choice? Gonzaga, Wazoo? Maybe. Gonzaga, Boise State? Maybe. Gonzaga, Utah State? Maybe, if they're having a good year. Like, there are other options. San Diego State, Boise State's a good game every year. Like, I'm not saying it won't be like that they'll only take Gonzaga, but if I'm CBS, I'm probably using all 3 of my regular season games on Gonzaga. And then the CBS Sports Network, the 17 games that they get, if they get first pick with all 17 of those slots, they might take as many Gonzaga games as they possibly can. And then let me say this. Whatever men's Gonzaga basketball game does not go to CBS or the CBS Sports Network, if the CW truly does just get to pick the best of the rest, and they have 35 games, there's no way that they're letting a Gonzaga game slip by them. There's no way. Even Gonzaga at home against Texas State, even Gonzaga at home against Fresno State. If I'm the CW, I'm taking that all day long because they have the data. They know how many more people watch Gonzaga basketball than these other teams. And like, again, I'm not saying that Gonzaga versus Texas State is more valuable than San Diego State versus Wazoo. Like, I think they might take that first. But I can't imagine if they have 35 games to play with, and we're assuming that CBS is taking a bunch of Gonzaga games. So maybe there's only, 5, 6, 7 Gonzaga games left. If I'm the CW, I'm taking every single one of them. So if that's truly how it works, if USA Network can't negotiate to make sure they get a few of those games, and it's truly CBS picks what they want, CW picks what they want, USA Network gets the rest, I might not expect to see Gonzaga on the USA Network until the Pac-12 conference tournament, because I'm not sure they're going to get any regular season games. Out of those 50 that they get, it's going to be a lot of Fresno State versus Utah State and Texas State versus Oregon State. Like, those are the kind of games that they're going to get. No disrespect, no hating on those teams. Just saying, I would expect Gonzaga to have the vast majority of their games on CBS, CBS Sports Network, and maybe a few of their less competitive games on the CW. And then the last thing I want to say about this here, no more ESPN. There's possible that ESPN Plus picks up some of the non-revenue generating sports like soccer, like women's, like soccer, like volleyball, maybe women's basketball ends up on ESPN Plus, baseball, things like that. But we're going to be done seeing Sean Farnham, and that makes me sad. And we're going to be done seeing Dave Fleming, and that makes me sad. What doesn't make me sad is that we're probably going to be done with those games that start 15, 20 minutes later than they're supposed to start because ESPN cannot budget their schedules accordingly. Be nice to be done with that. We'll be sad to be done potentially with Sean Farnham. I don't think he's leaving ESPN to take a job at CBS anytime soon. So I think that might be cherish him when he's calling the games this year. Let's put it that way. Last thing I want to say briefly here, Luca Foster, who just committed to Gonzaga a few weeks ago, was just named to the Naismith High School Player of the Year watch list for the best men's high school player in the country. Big congratulations to him for being named to that list. That is a tremendous accomplishment. Foster and Sam Funches both signed their NILs, which means their NLIs. I knew I was going to do that. NLI, their national letter of intent. They're coming to Gonzaga for next season. That they put pen to paper. It's official. Jack Cahill, the other player in the 2026 class, does not need to do that because he's an international prospect. So for Funches and Foster, this just seals the deal for them. And for Foster, he's expected to have a real big senior season at Link Academy in Missouri. Going to be fun to see how he does, knowing he's coming to Gonzaga next year. All right, folks, that's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Thank you so much. Those of you who have made the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Special shout out to those everyday listeners as well. We're going to have another show this week, but it will come out on Saturday, as we are going to be late night on Friday night. So I will record on Saturday after the game, getting you a recap of what went down with Arizona State, getting you a recap of Gonzaga's game, women's game against Colorado State. And then the Monday show will be getting you ready for that night's game against Southern Utah. Thanks again, folks. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And of course, as always, go Zags.